and today I'm here to kind of wrap up my 2021 year and also tell you about my 2022 goals. 2021 was the year when I finally returned to BookTube. I think I returned at like the end of February, and also the year when I went back on Goodreads. I'm gonna read you Goodreads stats first. So according to Goodreads, I read 62 books, but my actual count on my book notebook that I do is 63, so I'm not sure what happened there. But yes, so I read 63 books in 2021, which has been pretty well comparing to some other years. It did help that I actually also went back into listening to audiobooks, which is obviously great help, and I will talk about that later, how many books I've listened to. A count of pages, I read 18,368. My shortest book was 76 pages, and that was Empath, the survival guide for highly sensitive people. My longest book was The Labyrinth of the Spirits by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, which was 928 books according to this, but in fact I think I read 860 pages, but that was in the Russian edition. Average book length in 2021 is 296 pages. My most popular book was Where the Crawdads Sing, and least popular was Haunted Places of Wiltshire, which only 3 people shelved during 2021. My average rating for 2021 is 3.7, which is actually not bad. Highest rated on Goodreads is Labyrinth of the Spirits, again by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, which is 4.47 average. My first review of the year was The Haunting of Evelyn Jones, and there goes the books, which I'm not going to be talking about that at the moment. But I do have like my own stats as well of that I've written down. So I've got star ratings and I've got genres. I think that's pretty much it. So in terms of audiobooks, I listened to 8 audiobooks out of the 63 books that I read, which is a good amount. And considering I only went back to listening to audiobooks, again probably later in the year, don't quite remember when exactly, but I think it's a pretty decent amount. I think it was only for the last half of the year. So considering I'm starting January of 2022 already listening to the audiobook, I expect it'll be more audiobooks in 2022. Let's go through the ratings. These are the ratings including including half stars. I mean, obviously not on Goodreads, but I have written them down. So I've got 5-star books, I've got 11 of those, which is pretty good, I think. 4.5 stars is 3 books, 4 stars 20 books, 3.5 stars 2 books, 3 stars 19, 2.5 stars 1, 2 stars 5, and I also had 6 DNFs. So I don't have a 1-star rating because I think they will be just the DNFs, because when I don't like the book I normally tend to DNF it, and if I do like the book, the lowest rating I'm going to give it is probably 2 stars. So that's why. I'm not exactly surprised by anything of these stats on here. The only thing though, sometimes with 5-star and 4-star ratings, like I'm struggling now. I'm about to put together a list of my favourite books of 2021, and I've got 16 books on that list, combination of 4 stars and 5 stars. But what I've noticed, because I want to condense it to 10 books, which I'm really struggling with, so I'm not sure if I'm going to do top 15 or top 10. But what I'm struggling with, some of these that I want to put on the 10 list are actually 4-star books, and some of the ones that were rated 5 stars, I'm not thinking of putting them on the list. So this is a little bit vague, but I do think it's my reflection on how I look at it after that, not my immediate rating, if that makes sense. I also had 2 rereads this year, which is not too bad. I don't tend to reread a lot of books, but in 2022 I do need to read more, but I'm going to talk about that a bit later. In terms of genres read, my most read genre was middle grade fantasy or children's books, which was 15 books, which is quite surprising. I didn't realise I read that many. My next one goes, surprisingly, non-fiction with 9 books, and I think my goal, unofficial goal for this year, because I wasn't on BookTube last year, well, the year before last, 2020, my unofficial goal was to try and read more non-fiction. So 2021, obviously I read more non-fiction, and I've always said how always wanted to read more non-fiction because I'm always interested in different topics of that. So 9 books is pretty good, I think. My next one goes, as usual, historical fiction. I do read a lot of historical fiction. I enjoy it a lot, but that was 7 or 8. I couldn't quite, basically I think a couple of them were mixed genres, so I couldn't quite decide which genre it was in. So it's 7 or 8, which is like I said, about average for me on a yearly basis. Next one after that goes to YA fantasy, and then it's 5 YA fantasy and then 2 adult fantasy. So if we combine just fantasy genre, it's going to be 7 books, which is again probably more than I read for the past 4, or like in 2020, because I wasn't really a fantasy reader, but in 2021 I came back to fantasy, and I've got so many different fantasy books on my TBR, both adult and YA fantasy, which I'm really interested in, so look forward to reading those in 2022. My next one go similar to thriller mystery, which I read 4 of, and same amount for like, this is a really vague genre, it's like adult contemporary but a bit of like, I guess, magical realism, time travel sort of thing, was 4 books as well. So it was a difficult genre to put down, so there are 4 books in that sort of category. Don't know what else to put them. After that we go to adult contemporary, which I read 3 of, as well as 3 sci-fi books. Then we go 2 classics, 2 Gothic novels, 2 adult fantasy, I've already said that. And then I also had 1 paranormal book, 1 poetry collection, I don't even read poetry, and then 1 comic book. That is pretty much it for the stats, which doesn't really surprise me. But now let's move on to 2022 goals for me. I have written them down in this pretty little notebook, and hopefully I can use it much better. Oh, I also found this authors to read from in 2022. These are the 16 authors that I'd like to read books from, because I read 1 or 2 or a few books by that author, so I'd like to carry on with them, and I do have these authors' books on my TBR, so I might make a separate video for that a bit later, but we'll see. So my goals for 2022, first of all, is read more books by authors that I've read from before, which is that video is gonna go towards that goal. Because I realised when I read books by the same authors, obviously, if I read 1 book by the author, the chances that I'm gonna like the second book by them are really high, so I want to discover more like favourite authors of mine rather than just keep reading books that are by the authors that I've never read before. So I think I need to keep more on that. And the examples, if I want to give you, is Stacey Hall's, Laura Purcell, especially her like back books. I think there are a couple or 3. Michael Morpurgo, Margaret Rogerson, Joanne Harris. These are just a few that I'd like to read from this year. So hopefully that will happen. My goal number 2 is to read more sci-fi. I've always been interested in sci-fi, but for some reason it's just not something I tend to gravitate towards. Maybe because I don't find them particularly easy reads, because sometimes obviously you have to concentrate so much on what's happening, especially if it's like scientifically written or some difficult topic or something. So I tend to almost avoid them, but I always enjoy reading a sci-fi. Every time I read a sci-fi, I actually really like it. So I need to read more sci-fi, hopefully more than 3 this year. Like if I read 10, that would be amazing. Especially now I've got probably about 10 on my physical TBR, which would be just perfect to get those done. Then number 3 goes read more variety of different genres. So like by that I mean by next year I would like the stats that I told you about my genres read. They should pretty much be similar to one another. So I'd like to read more different varieties of genres. Maybe even try different ones that I've never read before much from. Like, I don't know, fantasy, romance, or I don't know, some different genres that I've not really read much from. Maybe discover some different genres that I don't really read. Who knows? Next one goes reread the books I need to reread and then carry on with the series. Again, I have mentioned them before, but it is the beautiful series. It is also, or I don't know what it's called. Then I need to reread The Bear and the Nightingale and go into the sequel. Potentially reread A Court of Thorns and Roses and carry on with the sequel, or just make a decision to DNF the series. And I also need to reread Strange the Dreamer in order to read Muse of Nightmares. So that's the examples of that. Next one is just read more books in general, and by that I mean physical books, because I enjoy reading books, and a lot of the time I just seem to like be wasting time in the evenings, the time that I could be reading, and that's when I want to read, not when I'm just forcing myself to read. So when I want to read, I'm either too tired to actually do it, or just doing something else when I could be reading. So I need to read more physical books. Next one is read more books from a box of stories. That's when I also mentioned that I'm gonna do a video soon for this project when I read 4 different books from 4 different boxes from 4 different genres from a box of stories, and upload it at some point. At the moment I've read 1 of them so far, so I've got 3 to go. Don't know when that's gonna happen, but hopefully within the next couple of months maybe, because I am subscribed to them for a few months now and I haven't read many of them. I read 1. That's how embarrassing it is. And I love the idea of a box of stories, and the books do sound really interesting, so I just need to make more of an effort to actually read them. Next challenge is to read more thriller or mystery novels, because again I've got a few of those on my shelf, probably about 10 or more, and I'm probably going to buy more throughout the years as well. So I need to get more into that, because it is again the genre that I do enjoy, but for some reason I tend to not read it as much. Don't know why, but it is the genre that I'm interested in, and I've got, like I said, quite a few actually, more than 10 books, because there are 1 book series that I've got on the top shelf which consists of 10 books, then I've got 6 more books from another series, and then 10 books on top of that separately. So I've got quite a few of those, so I better get on with it and read them. And the last challenge from here is to read some or all of my TBR veterans, because there are quite a few books on my shelves that have been there for quite some time. So in 2022 I'd like to read those books, because there's nothing wrong with them. It's not that I've lost interest at all, it's not the case whatsoever. It's just for whatever reason I've not got to them. Don't know why, but I would love to get to them for sure in 2022. So yeah, these are my goals for 2022. Let's see how I get on. I'm genuinely quite excited for 2022, seeing which books I'm going to read, which books I'm going to enjoy, hoping to discover a lot more favourite books, or a lot more favourite authors, maybe favourite genres, dive into more sci-fi, more mystery thriller, and also trying to keep on top of my non-fiction as well. I don't have many physical copies of non-fiction books. I've got probably 4. It'd be nice to read them as well, and maybe listen to more audiobooks, because I do find listening to audiobooks of non-fiction is actually better for me than reading them physically. So yeah, I'm excited for 2022. Let's see what it brings. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.